Hope everybody's enjoyed an uncharacteristically nice day today, it's fair to say. Anyway, it's my very great pleasure to introduce Dr. Regine and I, University of Leeds, once a colleague of mine at Manchester. We haven't met for a very long time. The last time, I think, was when I was doing a paper at Leeds, and Regina left before I finished, so you can see she's a woman of taste and discovery. So this evening she's come to talk to us about, I think, a book project. Well, there's a book project with this. So PLAUTUS AMPHITRUO. Should we feel sorry for ALCUMENA? All will be revealed. You don't want to listen to me in PLAUTUS AMPHITRUO. So I'll hand over to Regina to tell us about PLAUTUS.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Andy, for inviting me. It's a really long time, and I must have had to leave because of childcare issues at the time. At least because my daughter probably was then in a nursery and had to bring that up. So I'm really sorry about that. Okay, so today, the talk today is going to move from general information about romantic comedy to what makes the play I've been reading so very special, and what this means for our understanding of one of its characters, in ALCUMENA, the mother of the hero Hercules. And then to understand why it is special, I will set the background of what normally happens in romantic comedy. So hopefully I'll leave you with a good understanding of comedy in general and why our love triangle here stands out so much. Change the outline, please. Okay. So I'm giving you a very brief introduction to plotting comedy and the special case of the Amphitruo. So you can see he's quite an early playwright. He's from, especially in Latin literature, the earliest complete texts that we have. Of 130 comedies which were once sort of attributed to him, 20 and a half of them exist. And that means you can give you a characteristic of what Roman comedy usually is like. It is a very bourgeois setting. Class families in New cities, because the plot does actually takes a good play like Melinda or Diphilus, which are new comedy writers, essentially so forth, and then adapts those plays onto Latin. That's the good background. They're all really about boy meets a girl, and at the start of the comedy, quite often there's another tragic event as in a rape plot. So we didn't go process of the whole well. But invariably leads to the innocent girl's pregnancy out of wedlock, which is of course a disaster for her. But the desired outcome of these plans is a long-term partnership and marriage. So if the girl is a citizen girl, it ends up usually very happily with the marriage. Concubines, I'm using that word, it's not really a word we use in English these days, but it is explaining this kind of live-in partner, who could also be a slave girl, this very uneven relationship. They don't get married, but if the girl is a courtesan or a non-citizen, there is a continuation if there's some other one, but usually it is about continuation of the family. So when the citizen girls give girls during the play, I suppose it is a reintroduction of these misunderstood girls, these innocent victims, into society and the family, and this happy ending. Obstacles, for these obstacles, there is quite a lot of conflict between older and the younger generation. For example, parents have expectations of the young man, usually richly, and there's also the law of citizenship. Both parents have to be citizens of Athens, but not really necessarily married, but for the child to be a citizen, they have to be citizens. Also, there's something like lack of money or equality between families, and also girls snitch on nothing doing. Importantly, the law is always obeyed. No non-citizens marry, and babies are born citizens, slaves are freed, properly at the end of the play, and so on. So the happy ending is the overcoming of these obstacles, and you have people like slaves supporting their young master against the older generation, but often goddesses are clever slaves who are cleverer than everybody else in the room. And the audience, we have seen hundreds of these plays, the audience is conditioned to be on the side of the young man, despite what he has done to the girl, and on the side of the girl's love. We root for a happy ending, a marriage, and love to conquer all with the help of the slaves. So throughout Latin literature, comedy is defined by stock characters, including Plautus's own plays. For example, in Keele, Captives, he gives you a description where he actually says, this comedy is an exception. You won't meet the normal stock characters of a perjured king or an unprincipled courtesan or a blind captain. These are normal stock characters, but there are other stock characters in this with slaves so the thinking in stock characters influences the audience how to understand the play they're about to see and what expectations they should bring to the stock characters. So, stock characters in all the plays are roughly similar. The audience will have watched many plays with these and expect them to behave in similar ways. Comedy functions in law not because something unexpected happening altogether, but because of slight variations on the theme. So comedies and comedy plots are recognizable, and so are the characters because of the masks they're wearing. So you have old versus young men, for example, and especially because of costumes, the length, the color, and props. So here, even though we only have this picture of an old lifetime of exists, you can pretty much imagine where everybody is. This short costume being housed with an exact chest is a clever slave. He is on the side of what's clearly the hapless young lover there with his girlfriend. So the slave is cunning, he occasionally breaks the rules, he's always fully in tune with us as the audience, often speaks to us and breaking the fourth wall, as it were, and we root for him to sort it all out. There are also faithful slaves trying to be helpful, but not cunning at all. But he tends to hold it with so a faithful slave is with the older generation, the father figure, but the clever slave is usually the son of the young one. Now the young lover, see already from his face, he's reckless, he's idiotic, he gets himself into a situation he can't get himself out of, and relies on help from his elder slave. So that's how it goes. You also have the strict father in the older generation. He has a cudgel, is not afraid to use it. Usually they're very angry old men. They want to uphold order and make their children do what they think is best, and therefore they're clearly an obstacle to young loving. The swaggering soldier is also clearly an obstacle. He's very glorious and he's bragging. Not really, as it turns out, very brave indeed, and a rival to the lovers of daughters. Often he wants to own the young courtesan against her will, and sometimes, I should say, in a number at least, in Greek comedy, there can be a bragging but not entirely unsympathetic love interest themselves, but not in daughters. Plautus doesn't really like soldiers as his antagonists, so usually their soldiers are an obstacle as well. Lastly, we have parasites. They are freeborn young men. They need to be constantly bought with food. They are voracious, and they're not as loyal as the cunning slave to the young lover, but usually they are on their side. Sometimes they are also sort of the sidekick of the swaggering soldier. You get them as a little brother sometimes. So if somebody's a brother, he has a photo to go along with it, to be funny. And that's how it is. So when it comes to the female roles, in addition to, of course, slave girls of all kinds, we have courtesans who are the love interest. And it's quite important that the rules of comedy in Rome do not allow good middle-class girls to speak when they are unmarried. so you don't see them on stage. So if you want to have a love plot, to have a plausible story, you have the courtesan speak and profess her love for the young man. If she is genuinely in love with someone, she is either rewarded then with a discovery of her citizenship, for example, issue tokens and evidence of marriage, or at least if she's not a citizen, there's a prolonged loving relationship with the young man. If she's grassy naturally loving and so on. Free-born citizen girls are the ones who are wronged by the young man before the play starts. That often results in pregnancy, and therefore there are lots of pregnant women in the plays, but none of them ever seen on stage. You only hear them cry out behind the scenes when they give birth to the citizen baby during the play. So you hear something shouting, "Oh, what is of birth company," and that's it. But plays revolve about finding justice for the poor citizen girl and love for the young mother in marriage. You can see it's a complicated story. We also have married women. They're not always that old. Given the age of marriage, everyone is on married teens. So in the 90s, for example, they're not very old, they're just quite recent, but they're a little bit older than the young innocent girls. These women, married women, can speak on stage and can be quite scathing with and about their husbands. They can be quite shrewish, and sometimes they just are the women with common sense who sort out the men for them and so on. So drama comedy is an ever-changing interaction between these stock characters. And the plays work with mistaken identities and misunderstood situations. For instance, the girl is wrongly accused of being not a citizen, often marriageable, or of not being chaste, which is a complete disaster, also not marriage material. And all really relies on these mistaken identities being solved throughout the play with the help of Honey Slane, who ensures apprehending. It's harmonious. So, a huge percentage of the 27 more or less excellent plays for drama comedy were exactly like that. You read The Exception, the Amphitruo, which is a play where Jupiter disguises himself as Amphitruo, the husband of ALCUMENA, in order to speak with his virtuous wife. His son Mercury disguises himself as Sorcia, who is the couple's slave, and the gods play cruel tricks on the humans. ALCUMENA is now 10 months his own length, so she's full-term pregnant by her husband with his baby, and also she's also pregnant with twins, but the other one is a 7-month pregnancy from Jupiter, so one mother, 2 fathers, 3 months apart. And she's going to give birth to the twins at the end of the play. And one of those is the famous story of Hercules. So Amphitruo proceeds completely topsy-turvy while still playing with all those characters and within the rules of comedy. Roughly, Roman audiences and you are invited to see what happens in a play against their adjourned knowledge of comedy. So, this play is Dancing in Chains, and here are some of the variations. Yes, it does end with childbirth, and it also toys with the idea of divorce, not marriage. Though, in a proper comedy fashion, the marriage is saved in the end, and it's also what I have for you. So there's that usual happy ending. Then we have gods on stage, behaving in a very undignified way. They are deceivers, they are adulterers, they're using humans as playthings. Other plays, like PLAUTUS, may have a minor gods, I'm talking about goddesses like misapprehension or luxury, who give a prologue and then just wander off and you don't see them again. But these are taking part in the plot, and they're causing the mistaken identities along. We also have the birth of twins, one divine, one human, Hercules and Iphicles. So clearly, one is the outcome of adultery. The play is therefore a long stretch from the bourgeois concerns about continuation of the family. I should also say this is the only successful adultery play in extant comedies. Usually it's complete no-no. But ALCUMENA has been seen quite well. It's not her fault. Okay. We also have this mixing of stock characters here. Other plays may have stock characters with some admixtures of others. You might have a silly old man who is in love with his son's love interest, but nothing too dramatic. But here it goes completely haywire. So we have Mercury is not really surprisingly a highly ranking god. He's an Olympian, given the prologue, but he also acts as a cunning slave, as the lowest of the lower society, a running slave, and a parasite for his father. And these are all roles associated with the young man as a friend. Amphitruo is a manly old man, but also swaggering soldier, but also helpless lover who gets the girl in the end with his much desired baby and semi-divine trading in the bargain of an unwittingly adulterous relationship. Jupiter is an adulterer and a majestic god and a grumpy old man and a helpless young lover who needs his parasite / slave, some Mercury, to be on the lookout for him. So you can see how this ties into, but also it's quite different from the normal comedy fair. Now, what about ALCUMENA? We're going to come back to her in a minute. And I'm now bringing you back to the genre of the 80s, tragedy comedy. This is the only extant play that was from all antiquity, although there are fragments of Greek and Roman comedies and tragedies which cover the events leading to the birth of Hercules. So this is not an entirely unknown myth for Plautus' audience. But this mythological burlesque is unique in Plautus and fragments Greek and Roman, but we go to the side. But he doesn't really do mythological themes elsewhere, which makes this play so extraordinary and interesting, hopefully as well. So how does Plautus get away with this? The reason why this play is so different, it's not really a comedy or a tragedy. A tragic comedy, and there is a word that Plautus invented for this specific play. So every use of word for Plautus for that. So Mercury, as the prologue speaker, playfully introduces the play as a tragedy. I should tell you the point of this tragedy, he says. And Christensen, the editor of Plautus, actually then put a quotation on there. He says that he seems to be mimicking the process of composing such a travesty, this weird mix of tragedy and comedy. So he then says, if you want, I'll change the same play at once from a tragedy into a comedy, keeping the verses all the same. So he looks as if he's making up the genre of the play on the spot, then changes his mind with this new invention. So the comedy / tragic comedy the audience will see is defined again by the characters which appear in it. Tragic gods, kings and gods come on the stage, but also a comic slave. So Mercury makes it clear that just in Aristotle's poetic, what kind of characters feature in plays defines which genre they appear in. So even the text I just said that film looks the same, tragic or tragic. Next PowerPoint, please, just to tell you that I'm not lying. This is a quotation from Aristotle, where he says, tragedy deals with people who are better than us, as usually seen as kings and royal families, comedy deals with people who are worse than us, such as slaves and bourgeoisie. Okay, so this play is therefore mixed tragic comedy, which makes the identification of who the characters are, gods, slaves, both at the same time, the definition of the kind of play the audience is about to see. So again, we have a definition of our tragic genre. We are going to watch our characters. Next PowerPoint, please. So this is Jupiter on stage, still Mercury speaking, and he of course is a god who is linked with tragedy as a god. It doesn't appear much in tragedy, but certainly here Mercury tells us that he did. So Jupiter on stage suggests we're seeing tragedy, but not quite. And the last word here is comedy. So what's going on? Jupiter himself is going to act, so the god himself will act a role which involves him dressing up in a stage costume and acting in a play. The joke is pulled back quickly by the famous reference to Jupiter previously appearing on stage, possibly in a tragedy performed the previous year in Rome, perhaps in a Roman adaptation of Euripides' tragedy Armini, I don't know. But in tragedies, actors never break the fourth wall. Jupiter, however, here himself is an actor, and in the plot summary that now follows, it becomes clear that Jupiter himself is acting a role, namely that of the general Amphitryo. So Jupiter will himself become the actor who puts on a disguise, his own identity, in order to perform the role of somebody else. Actors merge into gods who merge into actors. This self-referentiality is not how tragedy works, but it is comedy. So the gods shift more than merely between the actor playing a role in a play and the god is actors impersonate. But the gods too play roles, and in these are the roles of stock characters from the comedy. Mercury also was undergone the same transformation as his father. He explains his unusual costume, his botanix companies, which is a mix of the dress of the slave stock character, comedy, but with subtle hints at his costume in tragedy. So you know she carries a petasus, which is a travel hat, all the four main characters carry this kind of travel hat. But his petasus has little wings because he's the god Hermes, Mercury, and Jupiter will have a little gold ribbon on his petasus. And Mercury tells us it's only us who can see this. It's making sure that we fully understand no one else can tell the difference. Mercury becomes Sosia, a slave with some conditions, in terms of what play we are going to watch. Doesn't make it a tragedy if it involves gods, or a comedy if it involves slaves. In terms of how Claudius defines it, it is a true mix, impersonating that characters on the stage. But Mercury's transformation as a god pretending to be a slave Sosia does not stop there, as he tries on different stock characters besides throughout the play, and therefore oversteps even the rules of the comedy. So Mercury the god, which makes like this, turns himself at some time into a parasite of his father, looking his father as the lover, and he becomes a good slave. Then he says it's a pleasure for me, he's a good slave to my father, and also he takes on sort of this sort of comic stage business like we saw in a picture over there, which is illustrating a completely different way of the running slave, which is usually a scene where the running slave runs in, he pushes aside the bystanders, he might even come through the audience, we don't know, and then delivers some bit of bad news to the lovers. So he takes on several stock characters which don't really overlap the comedy. Jupiter also provides a challenge because next one please. The text clearly describes Amphitruo, who looks like Jupiter as an old man. When his slave Romeo says, who's this old man lying on the floor after he collapsed? Although admittedly, some comedy old men are perhaps in their 40s. This identification should disqualify him entirely from being the ardent but helpless young lover who is the stock character in the play and who typically lies in a slave or parasite and help his money from wrong. Jupiter is therefore at the same time young and old in terms of stock characters, and at the time of the first performance of PLAUTUS, old versus young man, beard versus no beard, is probably a really true distinction takes on the form and appearance of Amphitryo, who as a general shows typical traits of the swaggering soldier, including the unfortunate tendency to lose out in a love triangle of body comedy, an ardent young lover who may or may not be willing to disguise himself or his parasite in order to deceive the soldier. So the gods explore different roles from comedy to dupe the humans and entertain themselves by trying out most available roles to them, because every sort of male role that they have. It seems that when gods double their roles, the snakes even more makes the humans Sosia and Amphitryo puts them in a really tight spot, because both of them experience crisis of identity. They suddenly lose control of who they are, when they stop characteristics, and then lose appearance of reality. Next one, please. So genre-wise, this play is a complete chaos, and deliberately so. A play of two contradictory parts: a tragedy, gods, comedy, slaves, and to add to the confusion, there is mistaken identities into the doubling of characters who look the same. There seem to be pairs of twos everywhere. This doubling also happens not only to Jupiter and Amphitryo, but to almost all the characters in how they interact. So we also have, in addition to those four men, we also have twin babies, Hercules and Amphitryo, one son divine, the other one human, offspring of one father each. So again, doubling of human and god. And we also have twin snakes attacking the boys. Hercules gets on both of them, really good more camera angles. And we also have two slave women belonging to ALCUMENA, Thessala, who's a non-speaking part, and Lamia, and also two potential eyewitnesses for the human characters' identities. Naucrates and Lephao. Naucrates is ALCUMENA's relative. He can't be found and never enters the stage. And Lephao, who is Amphitryo's helmsman, who does, but when he shows up, he cannot decide which of the two Amphitrios is the real one. But there is only one heroine, one single love interest, ALCUMENA. She's the only one not doubled up. And this singularity makes her doubly important, as it were, and scholars have seen the answer to what kind of play it is linked to how we read ALCUMENA. This is a comedy about marriage and babies, or is it a potential tragedy with bad outcomes for her and her family? Should we feel sorry for her or laugh at her for her being duped? And I should perhaps say there are some tragedies where Amphitryo doesn't really take very well to find out that ALCUMENA as a baby as a man and has been put on higher in order to go on her life. So it is a potential danger situation for her. So we just move to the next part, right? Do we fear for her? So it's a tragic ALCUMENA. She clearly has her fans as a serious, noble, and out-of-place and comedy character, mostly in older scholarship like Duckworth and Foster, who are chaste and noble, and dignified and very sympathetic. To them, she appears misplaced, a completely tragic character transplanted into a comic context. Perhaps an idea that is best illustrated by this famous Astias crater, which features Jupiter and Mercury dressed as Sosia in grotesque comic padding while trying to climb into the window, whilst a very dignified ALCUMENA looks out in what does not appear to be costume, so it's a plot in the middle of a comic farce. This reading sees her as a tragic figure through and through, dumped in this play as where she doesn't belong, she doesn't deserve to be in it, a tragic character quite out of place in the farce that she's forced to live in, and dealing with that with dignity, although she is treated quite cruelly by the others. Next part, please. Whereas their colleague, ALCUMENA, are laughing at her in its more recent scholarship. And I should say, I mean, no doubt laugh at Amphitruo, Socia, and the very human foibles, as well as the often really disgraceful gods, do the other same with ALCUMENA. Most recent scholarship sees it funny and focus on plays and morality. You can't say I'm German, so I don't do humour at all. Christensen, for example, the editor of the play, sees it as completely farcical and calls the play a sex farce. And the presence of gods plays this kind of imitation, second fiddle to that. After all, it's the gods what culpable in duping her. Clearly, there are moments of levity. Jupiter has lengthened the night to be with her for longer. And Socia actually notes that this extraordinarily long night might be a good one to hire a courtesan because you get more bang for your buck. Quite literally, this case. And Mercury, he's dropping on situation concurs. And yes, crucially, she is the only person to appear on the Greek and Roman stage pregnant, and her grotesquely padded body, after all there's only one baby, there's two in there, may indeed be a source of humour. It may be funny that she is pregnant and extra large to do twins that she's about to give birth to. And I should say, in the Greek play, certainly all men and women were wearing padding. Of course, that's probably not the case. You have more actors, so having her appear on stage in padding is really extraordinary. But I think it's important to look at the context here. Why she acts the way she does and says what she says in the case of Hercules. This is Aguila's famous song, her canticle about virtue. I hope you have read it to some extent. I'll tell you what happens just in case. And it's quite often a test case where both sides disagree. The first half discusses the presence of voluptas, of pleasure in life, and the pleasure she gets from being with her husband. The second half praises virtus, virtue, manliness, fully incarnated in her husband. And understanding this song context is important. She sings a song after what she thinks is her first encounter with her husband after a very long absence, 7 months. And Jupiter / Amphitruo they have to spend the night together, and he has told her all about his exploits and given her a precious gift that he's taken from the general of the defeated army. She's still dazzled by the man who sneaked out secretly from his troops after victory just to visit her in secret and has now gone back. It's flattering, isn't it? And since that man is actually Jupiter, who can blame her for being even more dazzled? After all, that's Jupiter's normal effect in normal living. So it may be funny that the Roman matron sings eagerly about the pleasure she derived from the night she has just spent, but it is seeing her husband that gives her the pleasure, and grief in its brevity, and its a renewed loneliness when he left her again that causes the pain. More context here. This is actually after the second night that Jupiter had made unnatural long to allow himself more time with Alcumena. She's just about to give birth to her full-term son Amphitruo, and Jupiter's son Hercules is now in a 7 months pregnancy. For the conception of Hercules, Jupiter also lengthened the night. It's the original famous long night. And right now, at the beginning of the play, he has lengthened another night to repeat the fun. We may snigger at Alcumena's distress, though she thinks her husband is going to return later in the day, but this first half of the song is clearly also meant to recall the very long absence from her husband and Jupiter, the 7 months between the 2 long nights, and the many months therefore of loneliness. So this song crosses the time between her falling pregnant and now. So the fact that she is now very round, indeed, is perhaps It's less funny than poignant, because it's a symbolization of the time that's passed. So against this very individual grief is set the second half, Amphitrio's official return is a victorious general. So his virtuous return in public glory will be a private joy, just enough for her. She sees his victorious public persona as a source of quiet pleasure for her soul. She distinguishes public and private desire, and individual loneliness, public leadership, public and private joy. So private pleasure is short in comparison to all the things that cause pain in public life and cause absence of God and husband. Now Christensen, among others, stresses the sexual connotations of the word pleasure. Here she uses the word voluptas quite often, and points out again that the short night that she says she has spent with her husband was actually a very long one. So like funny, German, but I don't want to argue that she just didn't notice, manipulated by the boy as she is. So I'm going to give her a range. Also, pleasure, voluptas, is of course associated with sex and being referred to Christensen in the language of comedy, specifically rather with courtesans and daughters. If you are a courtesan wanting to call your love in a term of endearment, call them mea voluptas, or courtesans of daughter, or mea voluptas, my pleasure, or darling and sweet. But it's not only that, and can also have a non-sexualized or innocent meaning in Latin as well. Never purely without mentioning Aquinas, the daughter of Keele and Cycle, she's actually but that's not sexual. So the connotations here double up, as it were. There is a one level. She means what she says entirely seriously, but it is our better informed, we the audience, who have heard the prologue and know that she is Jupiter's borrowed wife, as she's frequently referred to by the gods. And so we can see both connotations, the sexy one and the serious one here. And depending on which viewpoint you prioritize, she is indeed quite funny, but also tragic. Next one, please. Which is the other testimonies, that's her declaration of the dowry to the chastity, decency, and tender desire, fear of God, all in the good Roman terms. And here she actually says, this is when she's about to declare divorce to her husband, she says, I am dutiful for you, the Latin term is tibi morigera, and expresses the idea of a woman's behavior in law. So she means it entirely seriously that every good Roman patron would use it. But this is made funny by the same word used in a sexual way in Mercury's prologue, describing Jupiter's enjoyment of her body, where he says, indulges himself is my desire, and more than get it is what Jupiter does when he's posing as Hercules' husband. And Jupiter, despite her full-term pregnancy, sleeps with her twice during the play, because he asks her nicely, she actually gives in. So just like the song can be seen in two very different ways, different interpretations of pleasure, it is notable that the same word here can be used in these two different ways too, virtuously by her and illogically by the gods. Alcumena's behavior too can be seen both ways. She's undermined not by her own actions, but by the men and gods surrounding her, making any irony and fun and multi-layered. This doesn't really take anything away from her still expression of marital love, disappointment, I think. The joke is entirely in the eye of the beholder. The gods who manipulate her and the audience who worship her. Consequently, is a woman expressing delight in her husband funny because she's also in the final stages of pregnancy? Or doesn't she perhaps also double up or perhaps trouble up some stock character woman just like the men? Does she also incarnate a combination of several stock characters after all? And it's powered by this. Namely, is she the courtesan who sings songs about pleasure because only courtesans are allowed to be sensual on the Roman stage? Does she use the language of courtesans, like ladies from wonderful name like devotion or filmatio, or kissy cheeks, who actually are using eroticized language because that is the way affection is expressed in daughters of the audience and know that. But is she also the married matron who is treated badly by her husband, who wrongly suspects her of adultery because married couples on the Roman stage tend not to get on, and husbands may even threaten divorce? Like in the Brothers Nike, there is really a divorce. Here is not a threat of divorce, and that is literally as we like on. Or when she helps also the young girl who is the victim of a man's desire, falls pregnant and gives birth inside the stage building, and whose child is then recognized as the heir to the man's family, their fortune, and then the birth initiates a happy ending and family reunion. And I think the answers to all these three is yes, she is. So it's oddly then that, like the men, she does travel several stock role incarnations and easily moves from one to the other. So she's not an exception to the tragic comedy, a tragic character out of place, but the embodiment of that new kind of play. Someone whose words can be interpreted as both serious and funny depending on the context. If you want to see it as a tragedy, or if you want to see it as a comedy. And that's exactly what Mercury promised us in the prologue without changing anything, keeping the verses all the same. I think that's exactly what's happened here. And then, when she gives birth to two babies, this is the starkest of all imagery of this kind of doubling. So, should we feel sorry for Alcumena or laugh at her? I would argue that Alcumena is clearly both. The noble, innocent victim of Jupiter's deception, just like the young girls and daughters. In his other comedies, she gives birth to her children backstage during the play. Now she also has traces of the courtesan in her, as the eroticized language throughout the play, and the fact that we actually see her on stage indicates. Just like the gods, Alcumena moves between stock characters and the first seem impossible to reconcile. It is the duplicity of language that allows both readings are tragic and comical. The gods try out different stock characters for fun, and as a result of such, the humans suffer. So Socia and Amphitruo are openly losing their identities, so the stock characters are torn away from them. In confrontations with the gods, who usurp their appearance. Alcumena's threatened loss of identity is insidious. The identity of the characters on stage is as difficult to get grip on as the genre they are performing in. This is more than a tragic comedy defined by having roles of gods and fine slaves, and a comedy in which the barriers between its own stock characters become ever more fluid. PLAUTUS manages to make this a completely unique play, while at the same time sticking completely with the rules of comedy, and that's like what here. As a comedy, the play ends with the continuation of the family, the birth of babies, divine intervention, Deus ex machina, and one husband, Amphitruo, reconciled with his wife. His agreement and the agreement between the fathers that the babies are both going to be raised by him also makes both babies legitimate. So law is observed as well. Okay, Amphitruo is fine. Jupiter's problems, on the other hand, with his wife Juno, are just about to restart, as the birth of Hercules is a clear sign of Jupiter's infidelity. Again. And the twin snakes, although never said to be sent by Juno in the play, are an anticipation of Juno's own displeasure with her husband. And Juno, were she on stage, she'd be a matron of hell. Next one, please. So, as a tragedy, there's one further problem. As Mercury himself promised, it should involve gods and kings. But Amphitruo is not a king, merely the victorious general of King Creon of Thebes. He is a mere stalwart soldier, a mere general, an obstacle to the law between ALCUMENA and Jupiter. So Plautus ensures that at a last order of glance, the play mixed up of comedy and tragedy is more closely linked to comedy. Plautus remains a comedian. So, to conclude, the true identity of tragic comedy as both tragedy and comedy rests in what we think of ALCUMENA, the lady who sometimes behaves like a courtesan, appears on stage, but is due to giving birth to a baby that's not her husband's. Next one, please. Incidentally, this is a baby who is both human and divine. The demigod Hercules, who himself as an adult will feature in comedies as a grieving fool, butter comedy where he's wanting to eat, not porridge, and in tragedies as a hero driven to madness by the gods. So a tragic comedy is the perfect way to stage this birth. Thank you very much. Last slide, please. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Regine. Now, just in practice here, normally just to give you a breather for a second, while I dabble with a little bit of housekeeping. So, the next meeting of the branch will be in May. It will be on the 20th of May, and again, my first compulsive here is to try and balance Greek and Roman and also literature and history. And we've got to the Greek and history part, so Dr. Tom Clements will be coming here, and he's going to be talking to us about Sparta, things Spartan. So that's on the 20th of May, and it will be in this building. I'm not sure, maybe Peggy knows more than I about the reading groups rolling on. I've seen they are rolling on. But I've had no contact with anyone who's leading them at the moment, so I'm sure that we can put people in touch if they're interested in doing this.
Or his email link is on the website.
Right, there we are. So go on the website, and if you're interested, please click on the relevant thing. I don't think I've got any more news to tell to the branch at the moment. My understanding is that towards the very end of this calendar year, there will be the travelling exhibition about gladiators will arrive in Chester, and as ever, as a man interested in violence and things despicable, I shall certainly be going to that. And there was talk of us trying to organise a group to go and see it. I mean, there are some very good things from Britain, but also I think things have been dragged in from further afield, so it'll be a chance to see quite an interesting collection of material all in one place.
So it would be good to know, as I think I've mentioned in one of the circulars, if people are at least in principle interested in going as a group rather than individually.
But it will be in bleak midwinter, I think. I don't think it arrives in Chester before about November. I'll double check that. It is doing the rounds in the country now, I think, but it takes a long time to get up north. Not that this is the North Sea being Lancaster, but no matter. Anyway, on that note, I hope Regine has very kindly such a field questions. Are there any questions about the playful? Could I ask, Regine, when you talk about Plautus inventing the tragic comedy in this way, but at the same time you said that these plays are snatched from Greek plays and reworked into a Roman idiom. So, should we see that as true of this as well? In other words, is there a sort of tragic comedy, menander and such like, lying behind this? And if so, why is it vanished?
That's the big $64,000 question, really, and especially the Germans are very keen on trying to reconstruct the lost Greek original. He doesn't say what the original is, but so there's lots of guesses. It is possible that the source of this one, and perhaps of one other Plautus play, is actually not a new comedy by Menander, but middle comedy. So it could be Plato comicus. So there's another Plato who's not a philosopher but a comedian who wrote a play called The Long Night. So that is a candidate for this, because in middle comedy we do have actually mythological burlesques. We actually have sort of myths put into a slightly bourgeois context and made funny. So there are fragments, bits and pieces of these around. They're all collected. There's not much of those left. There are also other origins. Some scholars have speculated that this is a rewriting of tragedy, various tragedies by Euripides, including, because there's a lot of sort of thunder and lightning and mirages in there. Some scholars argue it might actually be inspired by Euripides' Bacchae, because there is also Dionysus also becoming a human and keeping his family. So there have been lots and lots of speculations of the origin of this review. I really want to treat this less as a sort of trying to use Plautus as a sort of quarry on which to reconstruct a lost Greek original from. I'm quite happy that we have Plautus, and yes, I think actually it's really quite funny, and I'm just really happy that we have it now. I base my analysis on the text that we have in front of us, also because I'm interested in how Plautus himself was then read in centuries and millennia after, and that is a text that everybody used. So there are some speculations. We don't have extant, complete middle comedy fragments, we have quite substantial ones of several hundred lines, but not really of mythological nests as far as we know. Possibly there is a middle comedy background to this, but certainly what Plautus' Mercury is doing on that stage, he's actually bringing this kind of burlesque for the first time, it seems, to Rome, and certainly for his audience, it would have been new, even though they would have seen plays, possibly a tragedy by Euripides, ALCUMENA, in a Latin adaptation on the stage in Rome, possibly the previous year. And there's allusions to some of other Plautus' plays. There's a play in HERCULES where he also seems to be alluding to a scene from ALCUMENA. So his audience would have known the plot really well from a tragedy, possibly the kind of tragedy where actually ALCUMENA ends up sitting on fire and is nearly killed off by her enraged husband, and Jupiter just lets some rain fall down and extinguishes the fire. But certainly there is a knowledge of the plot around, but certainly what he seems to saying is this sort of tragic comedy. It's the first that his golden audience can see. So we don't really know more than that, I'm afraid.
Is it entirely heretical to suggest that Plautus actually invented this?
Some people said it as well. There's a school who says that as well. So I am deliberately trying to keep out of that discussion, because there are two different schools in Germany and they don't talk to each other, and I'd rather
so at least you can talk to both of them.
Sorry?
At least you can talk to both of them if you don't enter the quarrel.
I'm not sure after tonight I can, but it's certainly there are friendships lost on this kind of issue. Yeah, certainly I think he has pushed this one further than some of the others. But there's some other plays in the 20 and a half that we have where we don't know what the original is and how much of this has been completely redone. We have one play of Plautus, the Bacchides, the Sisters Bacchides, where we actually have the Greek original of Menander, and so we've got about a few hundred lines where we compare what he has done to Menander. We have that since the 1960s, I think. Eric Hanley edited that, and we can tell that Plautus really adapted his plays a lot He changed scenes around, cut scenes, but he kept sort of the overall sort of plot line, even in the ones that he very followed the Greek original very closely. He did a lot of changes there, and that of course can be on the spectrum. He may very well have thought I can do this season.
Thank you. I have a point or two arising from our reading of indeed your translation, some of us 2 weeks ago. But before I do, can I preface that by saying to those who are watching the live stream that although we can't hear you speak, if you have any comments you want to make, do put them in the comments and I will read them out. But don't feel shy about doing that. No, something that struck me when we were reading the play, actually to do with oaths in the text. Several times people swear by Hercules.
Oh, yes.
Indeed, that appeared once on one of your slides earlier, which presumably is a conscious joke as he hasn't yet been born, but
Yes.
the audience might well swear by Hercules in their own time, I suppose. And I noticed also various oaths by Castor and Pollux, which presumably is a deliberate twin reference to match Heracles and Iphicles.
Yes, absolutely. Yes to both of these. Certainly, in comedy, actually, those three gods are quite often. Some women always swear by one of the twins, and the men swear by the others. And the women, I think, swear by Castor, and the men swear by Pollux. But Hercules, and I deliberately kept that in the translation because I think it's quite funny.
Me too.
Because he is not around yet. But it is actually in other plays by gods. It's a very sort of often frequently used kind of oath by Hercules. And usually modern translators just put in a suitable English phrase there, but I deliberately kept that because I think it is funny because it all really leads to the birth of the person of whom we're swearing. This is funny, of course. Castor and Pollux is another of these doubling.
Yes.
One of them is divine and the other one is human as well. So it's a lovely anticipation again of this kind of uneven twins that we have in this play. So it's another of those doublings as well. And again, it's a doubling again of something that is divine and human at the same time as well. So it's on the language as well. It's really, really clever, even on that basis. But again, it is only poignant because, as the audience will know, this is what people swear by in comedies all the time. But all of a sudden, really makes even more sense, which is quite great.
And just reverting for a moment to your answer on fragmentary Menander and others to Andy, of course it's quite frustrating late in the text here that it becomes fragmentary. So I suppose if that sort of Act 4 part, as in your text, was all we had, it would be very difficult to work out any relationship between a Greek fragmentary original and this. But of course we do at least have much of it in constant flow.
We actually have quite a bit of it. We have about 19 fragments, some of them only one line, some of them a bit longer. We have plot summaries like the one, we have two plot summaries from the 2nd century. I've given you the first one, the non-acrostic one on one of the slides. We also have people telling us about what the play is about. So people can reconstruct it. And actually, what happened in the Renaissance as well, after the rediscovery of the play, somebody called Hamolaus Barbarus actually did reconstruct. He also tried to match Plautus's meter, which is not particularly successful, but he's doing a really good job of rewriting some of the most scenes. And because that was there very early on, it really mashed itself into the text of Plautus. And that's really fascinating because later adaptations like Molière and then Kleist, Dryden, all these Camões, all these sort of later readers of Plautus have this reconstructed text by this Renaissance man in there and didn't realize it was actually not by Plautus. So we have this kind of what Plautus did to a possible Greek original, or certainly did in other plays to original, a bit of reconstructing and rewriting and mashing things up. That has happened to that text as well. And so you actually have, certainly for the later readers from the Renaissance onwards, we actually do have a serviceable text. But even without that, if you only have the fragments, they are really nicely from the 3 or so scenes that are missing, so that you know pretty much what will have happened. You just don't have Plautus' original text. But we can push it even further, and again, some of my German colleagues will just jump me in the face now, but there are some lines in there which are probably not by Plautus, which are interpolated. But again, I am looking at this from later, and this is the text we have, and I've not bothered with thinking about whether that line is by Plautus or not. It is in the text as we have, and I'm quite happy with that. I'm aware that this is Renaissance edition, but I'm glad we have it, because without it, if we only had those fragments, then a lot of beautiful things would have been written. So I'm glad that we don't have only those fragments that goes in the rest of the play. But you're right, and as I said in the first slide, we have 20 and a half of what once was perhaps 130 comedies. Not all of them will have been Plautus. His Thorough came up with a list of 21, which he was sure were by Plautus, reasonably sure were Plautus. These are the 21 that we have. But we have lots and lots of fragments of the others, and we can reconstruct some of those plays, at least really, based on those fragments, what we think may have happened. There's quite a lot of trick comedies in this one. Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yeah. It's, well, 130 were there. You know, from all the Greek tragedians, they are credited with about 100, and we have about seven of each of them, what we call Euripides. So it is always that you lose quite a lot. And with these tragedians, the ones which are used in teaching, those were the plays that survived. They were copied in Alexandria frequently, they survived. We have fragments of a lot of others in Papyri or cited elsewhere. With those 21, they were the ones that people studied relentlessly. So this is 2nd, 3rd century BC, and in the 2nd century AD, he went through a kind of renaissance, and people were very keen to read the real Plautus. So they kept reading and writing about those 21 plays. And you have to think of this as a time difference, like us and Shakespeare. So it is quaint format, different times, like 400 years difference. But they were the ones that people read. But the other Roman comedy playwright is Terence, who's a generation after Plautus. He died young, and what is even more special, we wrote 6 plays, but we have all 6 plays now. And it's really so rare in antiquity that we have one writers 100% output. We have all that Terence wrote. And that is really quite amazing. Because we have slightly unreliable or mentioned by biographies of Terence. We also have one of Plautus, but that's not completely made up. But Terence it's a generation later. Plautus is one of the earliest Latin texts, literary texts that we have. So a lot of it was lost. But Terence, he was embedded into the Stigmate circle. People wrote about him. And also Terence uses the prologues of his plays to tell us about him and about his relationships with the other playwrights at his time, and the relationship with the politicians that he was hanging out with. So we know a lot more about Terence. We also know that he died very young. And we have not only those prologues, but we also have what's called the Didascalia, which has a lot of production notes. Like when you go to a play, you buy the souvenir. It tells you, sometimes it tells us who's the music player in those plays. who the main actor was. So we actually know so much about Clarence's plays, when they were performed, we know the dates, sometimes we know the festivals. Plautus, we know about a couple of plays, and it's just a different time, there's more evidence, there's more, we don't know, and that's the ones that we know. Yes, I'm holding out for quite a lot of stuff in my Canadian. Hope I live long enough for them to, I hope it's not only online people just close their ears. It's no longer just bloody full of demons. Because, well, we only have the Greek library, they've not excavated the Roman library yet. And what they found so far mostly is Philodemus, who's a third-rate philosopher. Very, very important for Virgil, of course, us, incredibly wonderful that we have him for understanding the age and how Virgil was working on Grecian, these kind of Epicureans are working at the time, but quite a lot of the man. Please give us something else. So, yeah, this is definitely high on my list of things I would like to find in that library. I'll live long enough to see them excavate the Roman library. Please. Yeah, but it's of course every classicist dream is to thank you.
So do we have any further questions? In that case, I'd like to thank you very much for their time this evening and coming. I think we've had a very good exposition of a play in particular, but also then a very fine exposition of the context and the classical tradition to place it into context in general. So I'd like to thank Regine for both of those things. Her book is going for a song, and it sits on Amazon, so please go and buy the book. I have the Kindle version, I confess, mainly because my shelves heave, but perhaps I should invest in a proper one, not some hunter. But very, very interesting stuff. I've certainly learned an awful lot this evening about this thing, and as I say, about the context in general. So I'd just like to ask you to thank Regine in the traditional fashion.